Right now, somewhere in America, a person making $90,000 a year is lying awake, wondering how they still have less than $1,000 to their name. Not because they are lazy, not because they are bad with money, but because of something almost nobody has ever explained to them. Something hiding in plain sight inside every paycheck, every credit card statement, every single decision they thought was harmless. By the end of this video, you will understand exactly why so many hardworking, intelligent people hit 40 years old and feel like they are starting from zero. And more importantly, you will understand exactly how to make sure that never becomes your story. You have been lied to about money since the day you got your first paycheck. And the strange part is, nobody ever told you a single lie on purpose. It happened quietly, one small decision at a time, until one day you looked up and realized you were 40 years old with barely anything saved, a mortgage or rent payment that never seems to shrink, and a nagging feeling that everyone else somehow figured out something you didn't. If that feeling sounds familiar, you are not alone, and you are not broken. You are simply the product of a system that was never designed to make you wealthy. It was designed to make you comfortable enough to keep working and distracted enough to never ask why. Here is the uncomfortable truth. Being broke at 40 has almost nothing to do with intelligence, effort, or even income. Some of the highest earning professionals in the country, doctors, lawyers, engineers, are living paycheck to paycheck despite six-figure salaries, while a shockingly small number of modest income earners quietly build real wealth. That contradiction is the doorway into everything we are about to explore. Because once you understand why it happens, you can never look at your own bank account the same way again. The story does not begin with bad decisions. It begins with a set of invisible rules that were built into the modern financial system decades ago. Rules most people never learn because nobody sat them down and explained them. Schools taught algebra and history, but almost nobody taught the difference between an asset and a liability, or how compound interest works against you just as powerfully as it works for you. So people entered adulthood financially illiterate by design, not by accident, and they were handed a credit card before they were handed a lesson in interest rates. Think about your own first years of earning money. You got a job, and almost immediately your lifestyle expanded to match it. A slightly nicer apartment, a car payment instead of a beater, dinners out because you finally could. This is not a character flaw. It is a documented psychological pattern called lifestyle inflation, and it is one of the most powerful forces quietly keeping people poor. Every time your income rises, your spending rises just enough to erase the gap. So on paper you look successful, but in reality you're running on a treadmill that never lets you get ahead. Now layer onto that the way debt was marketed to your generation. Credit became normalized as a tool for living rather than a tool for building. Buy now, pay later. 0% for the first year. Minimum payments so small you barely notice them leaving your account. Each of these tools was engineered by financial institutions that profit enormously from your monthly interest. And they profit most when you feel like debt is simply a normal part of adult life rather than a warning sign. Here is where the story gets darker. Because debt alone does not explain why so many people in their late 30s and early 40s feel financially stuck despite working hard for 2 decades. The real culprit is something economists call the wealth gap between income and net worth. Income is what you earn. Net worth is what you actually keep and grow. Most people spend their entire 20s and 30s optimizing for income, chasing raises and promotions while almost completely ignoring net worth, the actual measure of financial freedom. By the time they hit 40, they have an impressive salary history and almost nothing to show for it in assets. This is where investing enters the picture, and this is where most people make their first truly costly mistake. Somewhere around their late 20s, when they finally have a little breathing room, they face a choice. Save the extra money in a savings account, or invest it and let compound growth do the heavy lifting. Study after study on retirement savings behavior shows that the majority of working adults either delay investing for years out of fear, confusion, or simple procrastination, or they never start meaningfully at all. And here is the part that should genuinely disturb you. $1 invested at 25 grows dramatically more over time than the same dollar invested at 35, not because the older investor made a mistake with the money itself, but because they lost the one resource that cannot be bought back: time. Compound growth is often called the eighth wonder of the world, and it deserves that reputation because it does not reward effort, it rewards patience combined with time in the market. Two people can invest the exact same total amount of money over their lifetime, but the one who started 10 years earlier can end up with dramatically more, simply because their money had more years to multiply on top of itself. This single mathematical reality is the quiet reason an entire generation feels like they are behind. They were never taught that waiting to invest is not a neutral decision. It is an active decision to give away future wealth. But delayed investing is only half the trap. The other half is where the money goes when people finally do start trying to build wealth. Millions of Americans have spent decades pouring extra income into paying off low-interest debt aggressively while completely ignoring retirement accounts, or doing the opposite, investing recklessly in speculative trends without any real financial foundation underneath them. Neither extreme works. The people who quietly become wealthy by 40% are rarely the ones chasing dramatic wins. They are the ones who mastered something far less exciting: consistency. This is where we have to talk about the emergency fund, because it sounds boring, but it might be the single most underestimated financial tool in existence. Survey after survey on American household finances has found that a large share of adults would struggle to cover even a modest, unexpected expense without going into debt. That single fact explains an enormous amount of financial fragility in this country. Without a cash cushion, one car repair, one medical bill, 1 month of reduced hours at work forces people into high-interest debt, and that debt then eats away at the very income they needed to start investing in the first place. It becomes a cycle, and cycles are notoriously difficult to break once they start, because each month feels like an emergency, and emergencies always feel like they justify skipping the saving step just one more time. Now, here is a truth that almost nobody says out loud, and it might make you uncomfortable. Being broke at 40 is often not about a single bad decision. It is about 1,000 small decisions that felt harmless in the moment. Skipping the retirement contribution 1 year to afford a vacation. Upgrading the car instead of driving the paid-off one for 3 more years. Assuming there would always be more time to start seriously investing later. Each decision alone seems forgivable. Stacked together over 15 or 20 years, they compound into a financial gap that feels impossible to close. So why does this keep happening generation after generation, instead of people learning from those who came before them? Part of the answer lies in how differently wealth is discussed in different households. Financial researchers and behavioral economists have long observed that money habits are heavily shaped by what a person witnessed growing up, not by what they were formally taught. If a household never discussed investing, retirement accounts, or long-term financial planning, the next generation typically repeats the same pattern of financial avoidance, simply because it feels normal. Meanwhile, households where financial literacy was modeled early tend to raise children who invest earlier, take on debt more cautiously, and build assets sooner. This is not about intelligence or opportunity alone. It is about exposure, and exposure is exactly what most people never received. There is also a psychological trap hiding underneath all of this, one that even financially educated people fall into. It is called present bias, the well-documented human tendency to overvalue immediate rewards and undervalue future ones, even when we logically know better. This is why a person can genuinely understand the math behind compound interest and still choose the new phone over the retirement contribution. The brain is not wired for abstract future benefits. It is wired for what feels good right now. Financial institutions understand this bias extremely well, which is exactly why so many financial products are designed to reward instant gratification. Buy now, pay later programs, easily accessible credit, subscription services, while genuine wealth-building tools like retirement accounts require deliberate, sometimes uncomfortable, ongoing discipline. There is one more piece of this puzzle that rarely gets discussed, and it might be the most painful one of all. It is the comparison trap. Social media has quietly rewired what an entire generation believes normal spending looks like. Vacations, renovated kitchens, new cars, all displayed constantly, all appearing effortless. Nobody posts a picture of their retirement account balance or their monthly budget spreadsheet. So the version of life people compare themselves to is almost never the full financial picture. It is a highlight reel funded by debt just as often as it is funded by real wealth. And because humans are wired to measure their own progress against the people around them, this constant exposure to curated lifestyles quietly pushes people to spend in ways that have nothing to do with their actual financial goals and everything to do with keeping up with an illusion. Now let's connect everything we have uncovered so far, because none of these forces work in isolation. Lifestyle inflation quietly eats every raise before it can become savings. Present bias pulls attention toward immediate spending instead of long-term investing. A missing emergency fund turns life's inevitable surprises into expensive debt. Delayed investing sacrifices the one resource, time, that compound growth depends on most. A lack of early financial exposure means most people are trying to solve all of this without ever being taught the rules of the game they are playing. And the comparison trap quietly convinces people to spend money they do not have on things they do not need to impress people who are often struggling with the exact same invisible pressure. Individually, each of these forces seems manageable. Together, over 15 or 20 years, they form the exact silent trap that leaves so many hardworking, intelligent adults staring at their finances at 40, wondering where it all went. But here is the part of this story that should give you hope instead of dread, because understanding a trap is the first step toward escaping it. The people who do break this cycle rarely do something extraordinary. They do something remarkably ordinary, repeated with unusual consistency. They automate their investing so present bias never gets a chance to talk them out of it. They build even a modest emergency cushion so one unexpected bill cannot derail years of progress. They resist the urge to inflate their lifestyle every time their income grows, choosing instead to let the gap between income and spending widen on purpose. They stop measuring their life against a highlight reel and start measuring it against their own goals instead. None of this requires a high income. It requires awareness of the forces working against you and a decision to stop playing a game you did not know the rules to. Think about what that actually means for someone starting today, even someone who feels like they are already behind. The math of compound growth does not care about your past, only about the time you have left. Someone who feels 20 years behind is not actually out of the game. They are simply proof of how powerful this system has been at keeping people distracted. The moment awareness enters the picture, the entire equation changes, because now every decision, every dollar, every automated transfer into an investment account is working against the exact forces that were once working against you. There is another layer to this that deserves attention, because it explains why so many people who genuinely try to fix their finances still end up frustrated. They chase complexity when they should be chasing simplicity. They spend hours researching the perfect stock pick, the perfect side hustle, the perfect trending investment, while completely neglecting the boring foundational habits that actually move the needle. Building wealth is rarely about finding some secret formula. It is about controlling the handful of variables that matter most. How much you spend relative to what you earn, how consistently you invest the difference, and how long you allow that money to sit untouched and growing. Everything else is noise dressed up as opportunity, and financial media has a strong incentive to keep that noise loud, because attention, not your wealth, is what generates their revenue. This is also where debt needs to be understood more precisely, because not all debt behaves the same way. And treating every dollar you owe as equally dangerous is itself a mistake that keeps people stuck. There is a meaningful difference between debt used to acquire something that can generate future value, and debt used simply to sustain a lifestyle in the present. A mortgage on a home you can comfortably afford is a very different financial instrument than a credit card balance carried forward every month at a punishing interest rate. The tragedy is that many households end up carrying the second kind for years, sometimes decades, without ever calculating just how much of their income that debt is silently consuming in interest alone. That silent leak is often the single largest obstacle standing between an average income and a genuinely secure financial future. It is worth pausing here to talk about what actually changes a person's trajectory, because it rarely looks like the dramatic financial makeover people imagine. It looks like automating a modest contribution to a retirement account the same week a raise arrives, before lifestyle has a chance to expand and absorb it. It looks like tracking spending honestly for even a single month, not out of guilt, but out of curiosity, because most people are shocked to discover exactly where their money quietly disappears. It looks like negotiating recurring expenses, refinancing high-interest debt when possible, and treating every unexpected windfall, a bonus, a tax refund, a gift, as an opportunity to strengthen the foundation rather than an excuse to celebrate with more spending. None of these actions are glamorous. All of them are extraordinarily effective when repeated for years instead of weeks. There is a reason this pattern feels so difficult to break even once someone understands it intellectually, and it comes down to identity. Many people do not see themselves as investors, as savers, as future wealthy individuals, because nobody around them modeled that identity growing up. Changing behavior long-term almost always requires changing self-perception first. The person who begins to see themselves as someone who invests consistently, regardless of how small the amount, starts making dozens of tiny decisions differently without even realizing it, because those decisions now align with who they believe they are, not just what a budget spreadsheet tells them to do. There is one final distinction worth making, because it separates people who make progress from people who stay stuck in cycles of frustration. Financial change does not require perfection, it requires direction. A person who saves an imperfect amount every single month for 20 years will outperform a person who waits for the perfect financial plan before starting at all. Perfection is often just procrastination wearing a more respectable disguise. The market does not ask whether you felt fully prepared before it started compounding your money. It simply rewards the people who showed up consistently, month after month, even when the amount felt too small to matter. 10 years from now, the version of you looking back will not care whether you started with $50 a month or $500. They will only care that you started. The real tragedy is not that so many people are behind financially at 40. The real tragedy is how quiet and invisible the reasons are. There is no dramatic villain, no single bad year, no obvious mistake to point to. Just decades of ordinary decisions made inside a system quietly engineered to keep people comfortable, distracted, and one paycheck away from starting over. And once you see that system clearly, once you understand that time, not income, is the true currency of wealth, you are no longer playing the same game everyone else has been losing without realizing it. The question is no longer why so many people are broke by 40. The question is what you are going to do differently, starting today, before another decade quietly disappears without your permission. If this video opened your eyes to something you had never noticed before, imagine what the next one could reveal, because this channel exists to expose exactly these kinds of invisible traps hiding inside your everyday financial life. Subscribe right now so you never miss the moment we uncover the next one. Because the difference between staying stuck and breaking free often comes down to simply knowing what